The preseason patch gave us a lot to look at, and there's still plenty to cover. Today, we're going to be going over the top 10 champions that abuse new Conqueror the best. While this rune doesn't look like it changed all too much, the removal of the true damage makes it a completely different rune suited for different champions. Remember that if you want the most out of GameLeap, you should check out our website, GameLeap.com. Our website is the best learning tool out there for you to help you improve your gameplay. With hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, there's something for everyone on the site. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion-specific courses. So if that is something that interests you, make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. Now, there are 2 different types of champions that are abusing new Conqueror at the moment. This is melee champions and ranged champions respectively. Since the rune operates completely differently for ranged and melee champions, we're going to cover them separately. First up, let's talk about 5 of the best melee users for Conqueror. What you're looking for in a melee user of Conqueror is somebody who can quickly stack it up to max stacks in order to capitalize on that adaptive force and healing. This isn't the only thing that's important as a melee user of Conqueror though. You also need to have damage left over for after you have Conqueror fully stacked. If you don't have any damage left over for after Conqueror is fully stacked, then you're not going to be healing anything because you're not going to be dealing any damage. This will make the rune effectively useless on most champions, meaning there's only a few melee champions that are able to use it to its fullest. First on the list of champions that use this rune really well is going to be Riven. With Riven, you already naturally weave autos in between your abilities, and you've got plenty of damaging abilities, meaning you're not going to have any problems stacking it, and you're going to be able to capitalize on the healing because of the execute on your ultimate, which is pretty much always going to be empowered by Conqueror. You're also going to be getting a second rotation of spells before Conqueror falls off, so if you are in an extended trade where you use multiple rotations of your spells, you're going to be able to keep Conqueror alive that whole time, healing the whole time, doing more damage the whole time, and it's just going to be some really good synergy. Next up is Yasuo. Yasuo uses Conqueror well for the exact same reason that Riven does. Again, your Q is very low cooldown, you weave autos in between each and every Q, and you have your E to stack Conq as well. Yasuo was one of the champions that was affected the least by the removal of the true damage because his ultimate gives him armor pen anyways. This means that Yasuo really doesn't need true damage. He's not going to be struggling against most tanks anyways, and if he is, he can just buy a Last Whisper on top of the penetration that he gets from his ultimate. While he isn't able to stack Conqueror as well as Riven is able to, he's able to deal a little bit more damage because of the armor penetration in his kit, and he's not hit as hard by the removal of the true damage. For this reason, I'd say that Conqueror is a little bit better on Yasuo than it is on Riven. Now, these are the 2 hardest picks that we're going to be covering today. The rest of them aren't going to be as difficult. Next up is going to be Hecarim. Hecarim is one of the few junglers that really makes the absolute most out of Conqueror. Again, Hecarim stacks it really quickly with his autos and his Qs, and on top of that, it's going to empower him even more because the healing increased. Hecarim really wasn't using the true damage all too much with Old Conqueror because the vast majority of his damage was already laid down by the time he got the true damage portion. Remember that Hecarim opens with his E, which is his highest damage ability, so there was never true damage being applied to that. With the AoE on his Q though, and the increase in healing that was put on Conqueror, he's going to be healing a whole lot more without having too much of a difference in the damage that he's dealing. In fact, Hecarim might be surviving long enough to get a second W off, which is a huge deal. If Hecarim is able to get 2 Ws off in a late game team fight while having Conqueror fully stacked the whole time and using his Qs, he's probably going to kill all of the backline members and survive. Now next up is another jungler, one of the only other junglers that can use the new Conqueror. The champion we're talking about here is Olaf. Now Olaf isn't quite as good of a champion as Hecarim in my opinion, but he does use Conqueror better. This is because of Olaf's insane synergy between his W and Conqueror. Now if this was the only synergy that Olaf had with new Conqueror, that would be enough to be a big deal, but New Conqueror applies on all damage dealt, meaning true damage as well. Whenever Olaf gets low in a fight and pops W, he's going to have an insane amount of attack speed, which means he's going to be able to put down more E's in a fight, healing him more, dealing more damage, keeping him alive longer, healing him even more, making him deal more damage. You get the point. Olaf truly will be unstoppable when he has his ultimate and his W active on fully stacked Conqueror. There's only going to be a few picks that are going to be able to deal with Olaf in this new state. Now next up, I want to give some honorable mentions. My 3 honorable mentions are going to be Jax, Garen, and Darius. All of these champions have a good way to stack Conqueror quickly. They've got good amounts of hybrid damage, whether that's physical damage and true damage in Garen and Darius's case, or magic damage and physical damage in Jax's case. You'll heal off of all of that. These champions didn't quite make the list, however, simply because there are other champions that do the same thing that they do with Conqueror, just a little bit better. Don't get me wrong, these champions are still fantastic with Conqueror, so feel free to play them as much as you want. There's just a few champions that are a little bit better. Now the number 1 melee abuser for Conqueror has to be Renekton. This is for one primary reason. Renekton stacks Conqueror faster than any other champion in the game. With an auto attack into an empowered W into an ultimate, you can get Conqueror fully stacked in less than 0.1 seconds. On top of this, you still have your E and your Q left over to deal damage and heal you with. Renekton's Q cooldown is lower than the fall off time on Conqueror, so even if you're not able to auto attack and you're only able to hit Qs, it's never going to fall off. Conqueror also allows you to exceed the healing cap on his Q. Normally the healing on your Q will cap out at 600 HP for each Q, but with Conqueror, it also takes a percentage of the damage that it deals. This means that if you are fed enough on Renekton, hitting an entire team with an empowered Q could result in more than 1,000 HP heal. This doesn't factor in items like Death's Dance or taking Ravenous Hunter or Spirit Visage. You can amp that healing even more. We also have to take into account the other change to Conqueror though, the removal of the true damage, which just doesn't affect Renekton. He doesn't care about true damage. He has Armor Shred on his E, and he has Armor Shred on Black Cleaver. This means that not only does he not care about the removal of the true damage on Conqueror, but none of his teammates that take Conqueror will care either. If you're going to pick one champion from this list to try out with a new Conqueror, it's gotta be Renekton, because he uses it way better than anyone else. Next up are going to be the ranged champions that can abuse Conqueror. Pretty much every single ADC can use Conqueror. This is because ADCs only get 1 stack per auto attack or ability as punishment, but their stacks last just as long as melees do. Since it's easier for a ranged champion to keep their stacks up with just a ranged auto attack, it means that ranged champions are able to abuse Conqueror. If this wasn't the case, then there wouldn't be really any ranged champions that could abuse it. Ranged champions also have really good consistent DPS compared to melee champions. When you put these two things together, suddenly it means that it's not very important whether or not the ranged champion stacks Conqueror quickly, but it's more important whether or not they're not going to drop the stacks. That being said, just because it isn't as important does not mean that you're not going to see benefit from stacking it faster. With the groundwork laid, we can safely say that every single ADC can use the new Conqueror. On-hit ADCs are going to use it a little bit better than crit-based ADCs, but that's simply because on-hit ADCs tend to have more attack speed. Once crit ADCs are able to get it fully stacked, they're going to hit harder because of that AD that they're getting that's going to be then critting. But aside from ADCs, what other ranged champions can use Conqueror? There are going to be 2 main mages in the game that use Conqueror way better than any of the other mages. First up is Rhys. Rhys uses it especially well because he has so many different spell casts. If you misposition against a Rhys and you get hit by his E in a wave, suddenly he's going to be able to all-in you using a full combo, which will put him up to either 8 or 9 stacks of Conqueror. If you try to trade back after that, he's just going to heal through all of your damage with subsequent uses of his E and Q. A normal Rhys combo, that is Q, E, Q, W, Q, E, Q, gives you 7 stacks of Conqueror. But if you prep a free E before that and then go for the combo, that's 1 additional stack. And then if you auto attack afterwards, that's another additional stack. Alternatively, if you don't think that you can hit your Qs without the target being rooted, you can go for Q, E, W, Q, E, Q. Again, you can weave autos in for extra stacks. It's going to be a little bit less damage, it's going to give you less stacks, but it's more guaranteed since you can't miss a rooted target. I prefer to only trade on Rhys if the enemy champion is standing in a wave, because then I can just E them and then Q the wave. I don't even need to hit them. Rhys is one of the only mages in the game that can stack it quickly, and on top of that still have damage left over in a sustained fight. The other mage that is able to do this is Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia's combo is a lot easier than Rhys's. With Cass, all you have to do is Q, E, 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 you get the point. Cassiopeia does use it a little bit better than Rhys in my opinion, if she has blue. This is because you can't miss Cassiopeia's E, and even if it's not empowered, it's still going to give you another stack, meaning you always have an opportunity to hit the next poison. Now Cassiopeia and Rhys are 2 very hard champions to play, just like Riven and Yasuo. So if these 2 are a little bit too daunting for you, I would recommend taking pretty much any other ADC into the game with Conqueror and trying it out. There's only going to be a few ADCs that aren't going to use Conqueror all too well, those being Quinn, Lethality Varus, or Lethality Jhin. Basically, if you're building lethality on your ADC, don't take Conqueror. I played against a Conqueror Kog'Maw who had a Lulu as their support, and it was one of the most miserable experiences of my life. I couldn't kill him, he did an insane amount of damage, all he did was build 2 attack speed items and then full tank, and he did an insane amount of damage, was unkillable, he healed through the whole fight, it was so frustrating. Even if I could get on top of the Kog'Maw, it just didn't matter because he had a Lulu, so I would just get polymorphed, and then Lulu would ult the Kog'Maw, which would knock me up, and she would shield him, and he was building tank, so I couldn't even break the shield. Now, if you're the type of person that wants to play this monstrosity while you watch your enemies suffer as they try to do anything to you, then by all means go for it, but I'm not the one who tipped you off to it. Realistically, I think there's going to be a hotfix or a patch coming up that's going to make it so that ranged characters can't use Conqueror. Since this is probably going to be the case, I would recommend trying the ranged champions that seem interesting to you first, while you are still able to. Remember that Conqueror is intended to be a melee keystone, so the melees, they're not going anywhere. Now, that is just about all that I have for you for today's video on the top abusers of the new Conqueror. I had a lot of fun making this video because I got to try out so many different champions with Conqueror and see so many different interactions. I'm sure that you guys will also have so much fun when trying out the new Conqueror, especially on these champions, and if you found something that works really well with Conqueror that I missed, then be sure to let me know in a comment down below. Now, of course, if you haven't already, make sure to check out our website, GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion specific courses. So if that is something that interests you, make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. As always, I'm Panther, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.